Hi everyone, and welcome to the first ever Story Origin and Dark Helix press reading event featuring some truly amazing BIPOC/LGBTQ female writers. I am your host, Christopher Gorman, and empowering female LGBTQ and BIPOC voices around the world and giving them equal opportunity and equal spacing is something I am deeply passionate about. So it's a pleasure to be chosen to host this event today. It's something I think is incredibly important in today's world, and I'm thrilled that you have all chosen to spend your evening with us. Tonight's event is being held in parallel to the Story Origin book giveaway, where tonight's authors are giving away free copies of their books. And I'm just going to copy and paste that link into the chat so you can see that there. So please take a look and enjoy your reads. And we hope that you enjoy these stories as read by the awesome authors themselves, as we all strive to entertain ourselves during this continuous COVID lockdowns, which I think is opening up in the States for everybody down there. For us, it is still very much not opening up, so we like our books even more. So everyone knows how the evening will go. I'm going to introduce each author. The author will introduce the piece they're read, and then afterwards we'll have some questions and answers fun. As each author reads, I will put links to their virtual presence in the chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat as we go, or raise your hand when we're finished. So our first author today is N.D. Jones. N.D. Jones, Ed D, is a USA Today best-selling author who lives in Maryland with her husband and 2 children. In her desire to see more novels with positive, sexy, and 3-dimensional African-American characters as soulmates, friends, and lovers, she took on that challenge herself. Along with the fantasy romance series Forever Yours and a contemporary romance trilogy, The Styles of Love, she has authored 3 paranormal romance series, Winged Warriors, Death and Destiny, and Dragon Shifter Romance, and an urban fantasy duology, Feline Nation. ND, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. It's interesting going first when I saw my name on that list. So what I'm going to read today, and you see behind me, is Of Fear and Faith, which is the first book in my Death and Destiny trilogy. So just to give you a little bit of quick background as far as what took place before the scene I'm about to read to you. So in the very beginning, this preternatural killer of witches, he goes in and he kills this family and he leaves a child behind. And so you have the local police officers who are investigating the case, and they are all preternatural, so they kind of know something special what's going on. And my hero is an FBI agent. So this is basically a meet cute between my heroine, who was brought in by her detective godfather to help him investigate the case because it's involving witches. So this is where we are now. They're in the hospital, and Mike, who was the detective, he's kind of going over the case with her. So she sat and listened and fought the urge to cover her mouth and squirm in her chair when Mike described the crime scene photos his temporary partner had shown him earlier in the day. And just when she was about to tell him she didn't need to know the coroner's findings, a wave of energy slammed into her, shredding her concentration, dissolving all thoughts of the child and the case. The energy rolled Sonora hard, forcing her eyes to close, mouth slightly parted, aura open and alert, searching for the source. Deep breaths, Sonora, deep, calming breaths. With embarrassed concentration, she slowly opened her eyes, and a smiling stranger stood before her, a chilled bottle of water in his right hand. Their eyes met, and another blast of energy assaulted her senses. She didn't close her eyes this time and refused to look away. No, Sonora simply absorbed the magical energy, opening her senses and pulling the scent to her. It swirled about her, strong but gentle. And while it should have felt strange, as if her body had been invaded by a foreign substance, it simply felt right. The man's eyes widened, almost as much as his nostrils when he inhaled deeply. Still, he only stared, gaze unwavering, eyes sparkling with unasked questions. Yeah, she had questions of her own, like, had he experienced the odd sensation too? Sonora didn't know, but she had felt it as strongly as she now felt the heat of his gaze roaming her body, slow and sensual, ratcheting up the indescribable energy between them tenfold. Damn. Mike stood and placed himself between Sonora and the fine stranger with the most tantalizing awe she had ever sensed. Mike faced the man, his head craned up to meet the taller man's eyes, a snarl sleeping through his lips when he said, "We talked about this. Remember what I said." Frowning, the stranger gave Mike a hard, "You're not worth my time" look before gazing over Mike's shoulder and at her. His smile returned and settled firmly on her still-seated form. Angling from behind her godfather, the stranger extended his right hand. "Hi, I'm Special Agent Asufa Berber. I assume you're Dr. Williams, the child psychologist and professor." Sonora stood and returned the smile. She took the offered hand and shook, trying futilely to ignore his unique masculine sense. The scent went straight to all the right places, subtly finding her genetic code and adding his own. Impossible. "Yes, it's nice to meet you, Special Agent Berber. Mike's told me so much about you, but not everything, not nearly." I'm gonna stop there because I'm not sure how long I've read.
All right. Sorry, I was really getting into that there. So a little bit behind. I like the sound of tall, tantalizing strangers. All right. Thank you, ND. Our next author today is Lauren L. Garcia. Lauren has been a storyteller all her life. She started writing down her stories at the age of 12. 2 decades and over 2 million words later, she shows no sign of stopping. In addition to living in various fantasy worlds of her own making, Lauren earned a BA in English Literature and married her high school sweetheart. Lauren resides in North Florida with her husband and pets, where she enjoys hiking, weightlifting, kayaking, and dancing at music festivals. Lauren, over to you.
Oh, I miss music festivals. Okay. Hey there, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to be reading from my romantic fantasy series. The series is called Catalyst Moon. I'm going to be reading from book 1 in the series. I'm going old school here. Just to set the scene a little bit, in this world, mages, people with magic, are kept under lock and key because no one trusts them. And they are guarded by these people called sentinels who they have a natural immunity to magic. So the main characters here, Kali and Stonewall. Kali is a mage, Stonewall is a sentinel. They are sort of on the run, and yeah, it's sort of a enemies to lovers kind of situation here. All right. Kali awoke to the whisper of drawn daggers. Had the sentinel decided she was a threat after all? Wan starlight revealed Stonewall, standing several paces away, daggers raised, facing perhaps half a dozen shadowy figures closing around him. Dressed in darkness, the newcomers wore hoods of inky cloth that only left their eyes visible. More shadowy shapes stood at the hollow's edge, blotting out the stars. "Get back," Stonewall said. "We have nothing of value, and I promise you don't want to cross me." On some unseen signal, the shadows fell upon him. Kali had seen a skilled sentinel in action many times before, but it was different somehow, watching Stonewall. She could just make out the sheen of his moving daggers. His movements were powerful and filled with grace, designed for maximum effectiveness with minimum effort. Judging by the other's cries of pain, he got a few strikes in, but for all of his speed and strength, it would only be a matter of time before he fell to the swarm of shadows. This in mind, Kali tried to rise, but someone tugged the chain between her bound wrists, jerking her away from Stonewall. Something hard shoved her to a kneeling position where she'd lain moments ago. The ground was still warm. The sudden impact sent a lance of pain through her already unhappy left knee, and she bit her tongue to keep from crying out. Fear stole her breath, but pain quickened her fear into hot anger. It buzzed in her ears and made her want to set these shadow attackers on fire, turn their bones to ashes, something, anything. But she could not concentrate when a strange gloved hand gripped her neck, nor when someone yanked her braid to pull her head back, so that all she could see were stars. Something sharp and cold pressed against her throat. The furious lash of Kali's heart almost drowned out the new voice, a woman's. "Stand down, Sentinel," the stranger said. Kali caught a flash of hematite as Stonewall turned her way. "Release her," he growled. "In Tor's name, release her at once." Someone snickered. The woman who'd spoken before hissed a string of words in a language Kali did not know, and the laughter ceased. "This mage is far too valuable," the stranger said in Iranian. "She's coming with us." "She's no mage," Stonewall said, breathing heavily from the fight. "Let her go." In response, the strange woman tugged at the chain that bound Kali's wrists. "Do you always bind your companion so, afraid she'll run from you otherwise?" How in the void did they know I was a mage, Kali thought, as the other shadows chortled. Had these strangers overheard her and Stonewall's earlier discussion? Or had they seen a lone sentinel and taken the chance that his companion was a magic user? Either way, the hematite binders confirmed Kali's identity. The strange woman drew back the sleeve of Kali's tunic, exposing Kali's arm to the chill air, and something sharp trailed along Kali's wrists and forearm. "Mage, that moon-tainted blood of yours is more valuable than all the gold and hematite in the world, and more effective than Thalo." Kali's mind raced, though it was almost impossible to think clearly, let alone speak. "You have need of a healer." The shadow shifted in place. "Yes." "Then my blood alone will do nothing for you," Kali managed, forcing herself to speak calmly. "I am more useful to you with my blood inside my veins. I'll help you, just don't kill me, please." There was a pause, much too long, before Kali heard the shadow again. "You swear this, mage?" "Yes," she whispered. "Very well." The blade at Kali's throat disappeared, but the stranger's grip did not relent. "I'll take her to the caravan," the shadow said. "Get rid of him." Stonewall tensed as the others moved in again, but Kali shook her head. "Please don't kill him either. He's with me. He's your captor. What does it matter to you if he dies?" "Because he's..." She faltered, searching for the right words, and the right sentiment. Why should she beg for Stonewall's life too? No clear answer came to mind. "He's sworn an oath to his gods to protect me," she said quickly. The strange woman laughed. "He's done a poor job of it so far." Kali could practically feel Stonewall glowering. "Take his weapons if you want," she said, "but let him live, please." Another shadowy figure from behind Kali spoke in the same unfamiliar language. Another added his voice, and another, until the lot of them were arguing. Finally, the first speaker, the one who held Kali, barked an order. The others fell silent. When she spoke to Kali in Iranian again, her voice was thoughtful. "Very well, mage. Neither of you will be harmed, if you cooperate." Stonewall muttered something beneath his breath, but Kali ignored him. "Yes, we'll both do as you say," she replied. "You heard your charge, Sentinel," the shadow said. "Drop your weapons." Stonewall did not move. The knife returned, pressed closer, but this time Kali refused to give in to the thrum of terror that burned behind her eyes. Instead, she tried to find Stonewall's face across the shadows, though she did not know what she thought she'd see within it. Fear, perhaps, or anger. His armored chest rose and fell with each heavy breath as he looked at her. Then his daggers hit the dirt, and he lifted his hands in surrender.
That's amazing, Lauren. Thank you very much for that. And I loved the "I am more useful to you with my blood in my veins" part. That was very good. I see ND nodding.
Thank you.
The bane of magic users everywhere. All right. So our next author today is Kay Leigh. Kay Leigh is a 33-year-old, once painter, sometimes freelancer, forever artist, living in Providence, Rhode Island. They write hopeful, tragic stories full of funny, horrible characters in various genres. Kay Leigh, over to you.
Hi. So first off, can you hear me clearly? Because technology sucks. Thank you. Secondly, I have a trilogy, one book out. I don't necessarily want to start at the beginning since it's a little confusing, but what I'm going to read is the first official chapter. There's like a little foreword, kind of like a first person narration, but it's confusing until later. So the first chapter, it's science fiction. You don't really need to know about the world since like nobody knows what's going on when it starts. I think that's like a good place to start. The play's credits performed in reverse, laughter woven in spliced tongues. Sobs were shots of vodka mined backwards and still frame memories. Today was the day he was born. At first, there was a void of nothing. Then the man was alive. He was alive, standing in a space that smelled like antiseptic. The room was large enough for a swept arm to feel no chairs, no walls, no people, and he was blind. The tremor of a frantic pulse in his ears was the beat of a song he knew too well. Fight or flight, do or die, the time is now. Then the sound became a sizzle. Naturally stumbling, the man placed his hand on a flat surface and followed it up with searching fingers. He was a slip of a shape, crawling like a bottom feeder until he reached a notch. He pushed his hand up between the space he felt and grasped what he imagined was silver. That white-knuckled hand meant he was alive. He used the handhold to follow the wall and found a seam. He felt the seam with his fingers and plastered his face to a slick surface, his mouth fogging the space in front of him. It was wet on the skin of his cheek. Finally, after what felt like hours, words found shape in his mouth. If he could speak, it surely meant that he was alive. We can swear, right? We're allowed to swear when we read this stuff. Okay. Where the fuck am I? He spat against the slick surface near his mouth. We had a problem booting you, spoke a muddy voice. Booting? The man replied, voice foreign in his ears. We're sanitizing you. We're unsure if contaminants infiltrate your system. So we're making sure there's nothing wrong. Okay? No, not okay. Why the fuck can't I see? The man asked as the panel shifted away from him with a soft hiss. He fell fawn-legged into someone taller than he was. They were a girl, he assumed perhaps foolishly, as his head connected with their chest. He could smell soft perfume and hear a click, not unlike hooves. He remembered that sound. You're talking about me like I don't fucking know. Some kind of Star Trek bullshit, he blurted out, pushing away from the woman he was braced against. She caught him and held him to her body. She was breathing. She had a heartbeat and she smelled like lavender. I had to pull an emergency protocol, she replied as she held him, as if he might shatter in her arms. Fucking pardon? He blurted out. You're the last one there is. I had to remove something, a block, the woman said in nothing words. I also had to add something in, she admitted, with more nothing words, though I'm not sure how much it'll grow. What the fuck does that mean? She sat the man down on a lifeless stool after much cajoling. His skin told him that it should be cold, but he felt vaguely anesthetized. He shivered anyways. You aren't supposed to shiver, she said. Am I supposed to be able to see too? He snapped. Sorry about that. Her heels clicked as she pressed something into the back of his neck. The pressure pulsed up through his jaw into his teeth. His senses screamed into being, burst in violent indigo. Better? She asked as he heard her step back, the telltale clicking sound grounding him in the here and now. The man's eyes adjusted, pupils dilating and shrinking in time. The cold white room was bright enough to burn his retinas to be stared long enough. Yes, he said, popping his jaw to release the pent-up pressure. It sizzled. He looked around the blurry room. The metal he had clung to wasn't silver, but an unassuming white. Clear glass tables and matching displays filled the room. All was painted in pails and glass, except for a little green plant in a geometric gold pot, a familiar shape, situated on a far desk. Something lived in a place that seemed so sterile that it thwarted all biology. He looked at the girl before him, as tall as he was, but with heels far taller. A searing blue gaze swept her face, flaccid blonde hair, crepe paper pale skin, with an expression just as brittle. Her lab coat was, however, noticeably tinted. It was so faint, the human eye would ignore the detail. It was hard for him not to notice. At the far end of the room, a swath of lab coats hung like bodies on a line. All the color had been bled from the fabric. Her shoes, however, were the color of riches. Gold, he said, his mouth impossibly dry. Yes, gold. The woman replied. The plant's yours too, then, he asked. Yes. There's more, but I don't know how long I've been reading for. Are we good? There's more, but I don't want to go over time.
You've got 2 more minutes if you want to use that.
I don't know if I read that fast. Okay. The woman looked down at him with large, deep-set brown eyes. The painting of her skin had been covered in makeup, yet the spies of imperfections remained. She grasped a clear clipboard at her high waist and was fiddling with what looked to be a pen. You don't seem to fit in here with all this, the man muttered, accompanied by a vague gesture. What a weird fucking dream. A120p, I need you to work with me here, she huffed. Her long fingers tapped the clipboard. That's not my name, he replied bluntly. Then tell me, smartass, what is your name? The moment she insulted him, the man's vision flickered to black. Colors hummed behind his eyelids as he squinted to force himself to focus through the mire and the pitch. A face came into view, the woman he'd fallen into moments earlier. Her rectangular face, her sitting across from him, her eating noodles, her loud slurping. This he saw and felt and smelled. You're such a smartass or whatever. You bought 2 bowls for yourself, and you knew I was in a diet, and you knew you weren't going to eat the other one. She still ate despite complaints, twirling her chopsticks to whisk a clump of thick noodles into her bright magenta mouth. He smelled the food. God, it smelled good. Where were they? His thoughts raced, but no answers came. Alex, hey, are you okay? Asked the woman. Yeah, Percy, I'm fine. Just thinking about, you need to get over it already. What's done is done. A pair of fingers snapped the man back to the present. Gone were the slurp noodles, gone was the banter, gone was the quaint slice of life moment from a time that had slipped through his fingers. The woman before him was an impatient teacher, and he, a young student, was failing her lesson. What were you doing? Where did you go? My reading's flatlined. I'm Alex, he parroted back the name he'd been called in this dream within a dream. I think this is pretty good, but
it's perfect.
Yay.
Awesome story, Kaylee. Dreams within dreams. Awesome. All right, so our next author today is J.F. Garrard. J.F. Garrard is an award-winning speculative fiction writer, editor, and publisher. She is the president of Dark Helix Press, serves as the co-president for the Canadian Authors Association's Toronto branch, festival coordinator for Literasian Toronto, deputy editor for Bryce Paper Magazine, and assistant editor for Amazing Stories. Her portfolio of books and short fiction is listed on jfgarrard.com, and you can find her on Twitter at jfgarrard. JF, over to you.
Thank you. So today I'm going to read a story called My Girl. This was published in Sirens Call Publications eSign, issue 37, which was a Woman in Horror Month issue. So my Zoom background is a picture of paper talismans that are mentioned in the story, and they're used as magical objects by the main character to try to save her unborn child. And this story starts off in Chinatown in a witch's house. So My Girl by J.F. Garrard. The chip in one of my manicured nails made me frown. Looking at my hands distracted me from the awful stench of blood, waiting for the witch to finish her work. Nausea had overwhelmed me when the little old lady slit the throat of a rooster with no warning, spraying some blood onto my expensive designer dress when she collected the red liquid into a white bowl to use as ink to draw on yellow pieces of paper. I felt too petrified to inquire about what was going on. It was amazing how a 200 square foot room could be crammed with so much stuff. Roosters were held in multiple cages, squawking angrily in my direction. A desk was filled with incense, swords made from ancient coins, long strips of yellow paper, calligraphy brushes, and other random crap. A shrine in the corner contained porcelain Chinese gods, honored with burning incense, which filled the room with smoke. My eyes shut for a moment from exhaustion as I sat on a tiny stool. The last few days had not been easy. I had gone for my 5 months ultrasound appointment by myself since my husband was out of town, and the doctor told me that the baby's heart had stopped beating. I had a corpse in my body and I freaked out. I called my mother in China, who told me not to tell my husband. They didn't trust him because he was a guilo, a white foreign devil. My parents were forever worried that he would divorce me, and a miscarriage would definitely make him leave me. Instead, my mother spent a day calling relatives all over North America. She made me book a flight to Vancouver, which was closer than flying back to China. Now here I was, sitting in a random witch's house, waiting for her to finish her spell. Take this and put it on your friend's belly. Take this other one and put it on your belly. For a day and night, the old woman rasped in a dialect of Cantonese, which I understood but had to think about for a few minutes due to her accent. Can you say that again? I took the 2 pieces of yellow paper gingerly by their corners, which had red Chinese calligraphy scribbled onto it and some other symbols I didn't recognize. The old woman looked at me as if I was an imbecile. That paper on your friend's belly, that paper on your belly. I held up one of the pieces of paper. This paper on my belly? No, the old woman sighed. You can't read Chinese, can you? No. A hot blush spread across my cheeks. I was sent to Toronto when I was very young, so I can only speak Chinese, but I can't write. All right, I will mark the corner of this piece of paper. The one with the mark you put on your belly, and the other one put on your friend's belly. How do I put it on? Use tape. Just tell her it's for good luck. She let out a soft cackle. Tell her it must not come off for at least a day and night, or else you'll have to pay a price. Pay a price? I need to give you more money? No. She shook her head as she used a dirty rag to wipe the desk before she took a drink from the bowl filled with blood. Her lips dripped with red liquid as she gave me her final words. Good luck and don't screw it up. The baby shower had been planned months before I got pregnant. I thought it would be fun. I would be a great hostess and impress people in my giant 10,000 square foot home while serving fancy snacks from fancy catering companies. Instead, the baby shower for Lana, my best friend, felt like the longest day in my life as I watched women giggle and fawn over her 8-month-old belly. When people approached me to comment on mine, I just smiled and put my hand protectively over my stomach. Nervously, I waited until Lana needed a break from the festivities. I dragged her into the upstairs washroom and told her I had a surprise for her. Oh my gosh, Laura, this is a huge bathroom. She stared at the marble floor, sauna tub, and gold-handled faucets enviously. This might sound a bit weird, but in the Asian culture, we have charms to bring luck to our children. I got one for your baby and mine. I pulled out the yellow pieces of paper from a gold box on the bathroom counter. Oh, that's so nice of you, she gushed. Is that Chinese writing? I thought you didn't know Chinese. I flew to Vancouver and got a priestess to make them especially for us. I gave a tight grin. She said that we have to wear this on our belly for 24 hours, and special luck will fall onto our children. Well, I do need some luck, she lamented. Will might get laid off soon, and just getting unemployment on mat leave isn't going to pay for much. Don't worry, I'll ask my husband to see if his company has any extra positions to fill your husband into. I opened the medicine cabinet to grab some surgical tape. Let's put lots of tape on so the paper doesn't fall off. We help each other attach the yellow pieces of paper onto our bellies and then lowered our clothes on top of it. This feels funny, Lana giggled, but thank you. If Ryan does have any positions, please let me know. Of course. I hug her. Why don't you go back downstairs? I'm feeling a bit nauseous. I stare at myself in the mirror, a well-dressed woman with deep bags under her eyes. Pulling out some foundation and blush, I put makeup on my face to hide my sleepless night. A few minutes later, I felt it, a great rush of warmth where the yellow piece of paper was. The transfer of chi energy from her baby to mine was starting. My eyes closed for a moment. In my head, I told myself I was doing the right thing. It would be hard for her to raise a third child in her house, and I had more than enough money to raise a dozen if I wanted to. She was younger, and if she lost this one, she could get pregnant again. But for me at 40, getting pregnant again was near impossible. So I'm going to stop the story here. I actually recorded the full reading on YouTube for Women in Horror Month last year. So if you visit my website, JF Garrard, you'll probably find a link, or Dark Helix Press has a link as well to the video. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, JF. That's some inspiration for all the ages. Good luck and don't screw it up.
I copied that from RuPaul, actually.
I knew I recognized that. Okay. So our next guest today is Karen Janowsky. Karen has loved superheroes and ancient mythology since the first time she saw the Super Friends on television in 1970s. Because flying an invisible jet was never a viable career option, and because running around in a cape, swimsuit, and bright red boots is not socially acceptable for adults, she teaches yoga and writing at the College of Southern Maryland. Her stories and poems have been featured in several anthologies and literary magazines since 1991. She received her master's degree in English from Florida State University. Karen also has a newsletter you can subscribe to for a chance every month to win signed paperbacks. I'll put the link to that in the chat. And I'm just going to say here, Karen, that I spent my childhood dreaming of being a starship captain, so I 100% support your early career goals. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Or maybe not. Did we lose Karen? I think we might have lost Karen.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't think she's here.
All right. Well, we'll move on to our next guest. Sorry, Karen, if you do come back in, we'll reread. All right. So, last but certainly not least, we have Kris Bowser. Kris Bowser has spent her life adventuring in the rocky hills and forests of southern New England. Goblins taught her how to sneak into the other worlds that exist, tucked into corners and around the bends. Though Kris is in a rebel band of superheroes and outcasts, she is often caught in the dystopian clutches of mundane problems, and must send her characters to do the adventuring for her. She lives with her partner in an old mill town, haunted by the spirits and shadows of machines and industry. And Kris, over to you.
So I'm going to be reading from my current work in progress, Stars Fall Out. It's in the revision stages. I'm currently splitting it from one very, very long book into 3 normal-sized books. And so this is a secondary world fantasy in which, there's this great big empire, as one will have in these things. And one feature of this empire is that they have magic and no one else does. So this one person in one of their occupied provinces, he decides he's going to create his own magic. And it's kind of a university town. He's a professor and he sets up his own special test to see who can do this magic. So in the beginning, my main character and her sister both go to take the test. My main character fails and goes on to do some inadvisable things like stealing the magic vial that the professor made. And her sister, meanwhile, becomes the first student of his new magic. And so this is going to pick up with her pretty close to the beginning. I stepped into my new life at the top of the tower, and it glittered with light on glass. Sunlight flooded the entire lab like rain on river stones. It saturated tables cluttered with glass instruments that prismed it further. Professor Garrard hunched over a high work table. What? My lighting just changed. That was weird. Professor Garrard hunched over a high work table, and I shut the door softly behind me so that I could creep to a low window and peek out at the city below and catch my breath before announcing myself. It had been hot that day, and I had run up countless stairs to get to the lab. Sweat beaded in formed rivers down my back. The base of the tower was close enough to home in the bakery, but I hadn't factored in the stairs. They could have had a lift put in, said Professor Garrard behind me, but of course they didn't and won't. The Carouge Empire wants you to feel every bit of their might and majesty as you take in the full height of their monstrous tower through your aching leg muscles. Another pompous imperial structure. With a pompous imperial name, I said, finally stepping towards him. Indeed. He scoffed. The Tower of Refracted Sunlight. I hear it translates even longer, I said, but even I had to admit that it earned the rest of the name, especially here. I walked up to the long table where he had been working with all manner of dazzling magical equipment. Books filled with formulas lay open one on top of the other, and it hit me that I was going to have to learn all this. So, I was wondering, I said. I mean, I passed your test, but I know nothing about your magic. Of course you don't. No one does. Professor Garrard plunked a variety of instruments down in front of me, and then added, It's quite simple, really, which should have been warning enough. Does anyone ever say, it's quite simple, really, the sun sets each night? Or, it's quite simple, really, you just add the 2 numbers together? Or, It's quite simple, really. It's only a 3-letter word. No, they do not. They say, it's quite simple, really, and then follow up with a convoluted explanation that only makes sense to someone whose brain is a labyrinth of analogies and equations and can translate one into the other. And that was how he explained the magic to me, in so many words. When he finished, he handed me a fist-sized cobble of parts and said, "You have the ability. Let's see what you can do." I stared at it. He'd called it an impression chamber during his speech, but that meant nothing to me. "Here," he said, picking up a small bottle of liquid and tipping it into a funnel along the side. "Do it now." He watched as I picked up the device and turned the strange mechanism over and over in my hands. "You should be able to do it," he said, looking both hungry and disappointed, as if I were a piece of steak that had turned out too chewy to eat. Panic shot through me in hot and cold at once. The bakery seemed so much closer than it had a short time ago. I imagined the opportunity of the first Fionn magic receding away on the harsh Nursuathan tide, and me falling, all the heights of the tower back down into dingy floors and bags of flour, where I would spend the rest of my life braiding dough into rolls with my sister. I think the heat's getting to me," I said, and then added in what I hoped was a stroke of genius. "I can feel something, though, like I felt at the test." "Of course." Gordas slammed the table. "You can feel it. Raw, instinctual," he said fiercely. "You knew it was there the way you know to put your hand out to catch your fall. All these years I've toiled in theory. That's all we've had for centuries. But it isn't about theory anymore. It's about praxis. Wielding the magic, being the eye of its storm, surging forward and creating a glorious new place in our world." "Yes," I breathed, and it was half a lie, because I hadn't felt anything raw or instinctual, but also half the truth, because I determined in that moment that I would wield the magic, and it would float me up and hold me up above my father's bakery all the rest of my life. Encouraged by my show of promise, Professor Gordas spent another 30 minutes going over the theory that explained my nascent ability to use magic. Surprisingly sympathetic to my feigned heat exhaustion, he had given me the rough draft of his instruction manual to read while I sipped at some mint tea. I didn't know where he had procured the tea from, but presumably the kettle may have been lost among clutter on the long table of equipment. When I left, I dashed down those wide sandy stone stairs as though gravity meant nothing. Halfway down, I crouched on the landing and pulled out the impression chamber. Washed in gentle, flickering sunlight and shadow like sand beneath water, I turned it over in my hands. Away from Gordas' gaze, I finally paused to examine it, to fiddle with the mechanism and run my fingers over the smooth surface. I closed my eyes and simply held it and breathed. And then I felt something, not in my hands, but around them. Around me and in me, in all of me. Not the raw instinctual power of a storm surge, but something tiny and alive, wriggling like a tadpole. I gathered it to my heart for a small, amazed moment, then continued down the stairs.
That's amazing. Wonderful reading. And I cannot count the number of times that It's Quite Simple Really has ballooned into an all-consuming project for the next week or two or a month. So I just wish one of them had been about magic. So anyway, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for your very absolutely amazing and engaging readings. I can't wait to read more. I've already downloaded all of the free ebooks and looked all of you up and started following you. So I'm looking forward to next readings and supporting you. So do we have any questions from anybody, for anybody? No. Anybody working on, I'll ask a question. Is there anybody working on an interesting new project that you want to talk about?
I'm about to finish the series that I read from, and it's been almost 10 years, and I'm so ready to be done with it.
That's awesome.
Oh God, I can't wait.
Yes, congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll share. I'm working on the second book in my Fairy Tale Fatale series. So it's basically, I have fairy tale reimaginings, which is tremendously different than the retelling. So in that, I kind of ask like a what if or type of question. So I'm looking at Goldilocks. And so my what if question is basically, or like my why question is, why did she run from point A to point B? So what was she running from actually? And so I look at that because it's a really short type of fairy tale, but that's what I'm working on. And it's entitled Barely Gold. So I have bear shifters, because I write a lot of shifters. I have bear shifters, and I had elephants and bird shifters in there. So that's what I'm working on. And hopefully I'll finish it soon. So someone else answer.
That sounds awesome too, for sure. And Lauren, I believe Frederick is asking how many books are in your series.
This is 5 books total. Number 5 is being edited right now. Well, not right now, but in the process. And it was supposed to be 3, and we all know how these things go, particularly with fantasy. So it just kind of blew up.
Nice, awesome, cool.
I can go next. I saw everyone running to get a book. I ran to get a book because I saw everyone had a book. But let's see. So this is can't really see it because I have a green screen behind me. But this is a vampire book that I've been working on. So the first vampire book I published is called The Undead Sorceress. It's like a East meets West vampire book where vampires suck chi energy instead of blood. And at the time, I actually had a hard time looking for a publisher because everyone told me vampires were European. And I was like, there are actually Asian vampires. So I couldn't find a respectable publisher that would publish my stuff. So I did a Kickstarter, and that's how I started Dark Helix Press, actually. It was to publish my stuff and to publish other people's stuff. So I'm working on a sequel for this. I actually did write a sequel, and it was about a king that was dying. But then unexpectedly, my own father died. So then I threw the manuscript away. I couldn't work on it anymore. So I'm starting from fresh on book 2, and eventually I'll get it out. I know I'm a very slow writer, and I procrastinate a lot. But it'll get there eventually. But I've been also writing more short stories. So every year I have a goal of publishing at least 1 or 2 short stories. And one short story, there was a call for an East Asian female superhero story. So I wrote one about someone demon hunting in San Francisco in the 1800s, which is a very terrible time to be female. If you're a female at the time, and if you're BIPOC, especially bad. You don't want to be alive at that time. But anyhow, it's based there. My short story, which I thought actually was quite good, was rejected. So anyhow, so I'm expanding into a novel. So screw them. I'm going to make it into another book. So that's what I'm working on.
Awesome. And did you leave in the king, or is that?
Yeah, I think I'll probably kill him off anyways, but like not as extensively as I was gonna write it.
Not with the deep detail. Cool.
Well, it's just kind of like it was an end of an era in the book, and then end of an era in my own life too, and it's a bit too close. So yeah.
Absolutely. Anybody else have news to share of what they're working on, or?
I'll share. So the Consuls of Voss series is like the only story I've written, and I have 2 more coming out. It's going to be like months of work. I finished them, but like I'm self-publishing all of it, so it's like so much work, to be honest. It's tons of work. But I'm also hoping to make an animated pilot at some point of like the story. So it's like already kind of in drafts. I don't imagine it's going to go anywhere. I don't imagine people be like, yeah, that's sick. But I think it'd be pretty awesome. Like, I think making multimedia art of your stories is like pretty rad.
Yeah. Did you do I see like in your bio, you're a forever artist, once painter.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do the art that's behind you there?
Yeah. I've done all the art for the series, for the covers, the character art on the website. I made the music for the trailers. I made the trailers. Like,
Wow.
Multi-talented.
Multi-talented.
Yeah, or just, anal retentive and a little nuts. Like, maybe.
They go hand in hand.
I agree.
Awesome. All right. So another question that we had was, what inspires your writing? Anyone want to take that one? Going once, going twice. I'm gonna have to
A
pinpoint one of
shot.
you.
So I was talking to my partner about this the other day, and he was saying basically that I have to be a writer in order to justify all my weird Google searches. But I kind of felt like there's some truth to that, because I think curiosity is a big motivator. Just like myself, the world, what if things were different? So yeah.
I hear you. Nobody should see my Google searches ever, because they just land me in prison or something, probably. What about ND? What about yourself? And
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because that's so true with the way we search. And I mean, you know, as often as we search a lot and do a lot of research, and you're right, we could really be taken out of handcuffs. You know, you're searching how to murder people, how to build bombs and all kinds of stuff. Okay, so for me, what inspires me? It definitely varies from book to book. I love what JF said as far as bringing a cultural lens. That was one of the things that really drew me to you. You tell me your talismans and everything, and even how the person told you that vampires, you know, weren't Asian or Chinese. I mean, that pissed me off just hearing it. But I with my magic and my mythos, I draw a lot from different African mythology, also from contemporary issues. So again, and I referenced my Barely Gold, and I was thinking about my character, and I'm brainstorming. What came to me was the big issue of child trafficking. As a matter of fact, this morning when I got up and I pulled up my phone, and you know how Yahoo, you know, you receive the latest Yahoo news, and they talked about 50 African-American young women missing from New York. And it's all about that child trafficking. And that's exactly what I'm writing about. So when I looked at the question of what was Goldilocks running from, why would she leave, you know, her home and then go to a place that she doesn't know, and she's eating these people's food and she's sleeping? What would make a child, she's like 6 or 7, what would make a child do something like that? And so it's very timely. So sometimes I'll take a very contemporary real issue and then wrap it around in a fantastical world.
yeah, that's amazing, and that's something I think that fiction can do so well, is highlight really important causes that don't get proper news coverage, or they get news coverage but they don't really sink into people the way reading it in a book makes it real to people, even though it is a fictional experience. And I have to say too, I love that one of the things driving you is your desire to see more three-dimensional African American characters, because it's so true, right? Well, if you're not a majority, you're mostly two-dimensional and kind of sidelined in everything, right? Stereotypes rule. So I was really happy to see all your books and everything. Okay. Anybody else?
Is there a hand up? Is that what that symbol means?
Oh, that is. Yeah. Kate.
Sorry, my mute button didn't want to work. Everything, all the excerpts were really, really great. And Dee, your thing about the fairy tale sounded really cool. It's reminded me of a book that I love called The 13th Tale. And it's a story within a story, but the one character, this author who's decided to do a biography of her life, you know, and pick someone to interview her, her most famous work in the universe was reimagined fairy tales. And then like one of the stories winds up missing from publication right before it's published, and kind of takes on this whole larger than life mythos. But it was just really interesting to see like how the author took these traditional fairy tales like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and the Little Mermaid and such, and then in this universe, in the universe of the novel, like retold them and recreated them, and then how they tied into the larger plot of the story, especially with like the missing 13th tale that everyone was like, oh, what was it? Why did she take it out? Like, what's it really about and stuff like that. So I just like, that was just really interesting when you mentioned how like with Goldilocks and yeah, how does a 6-year-old kind of wind up at a cabin in the middle of the woods breaking into somebody else's house? and stuff like that. Yeah.
It was different back then. If you're a 6-year-old, you could be sent out, outside by
Yeah.
yourself.
So,
It sounds
true.
cool, Kate. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it came out. It's like one of my favorite books. It came out like a while ago, but it's The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. But it's very interesting because it's just, again, it's like a story within a story, and it's just, if you're like a literature, like book lovers, and all, I think like it's kind of ticks all those boxes. So
I'm gonna look it up. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I took away my thing so you could actually see the book now.
Oh, cool.
So that's what it looks like. It has a Asian female on the cover, which is apparently rare in a lot of books. But I was gonna say a lot of my inspiration comes from life, and I think in a way I write my best when I'm very angry, because I think having anger gives me some energy. And growing up, quite honestly, I read a lot of. Initially, I read a lot of like Sweet Valley High and stuff like that. And for some reason, this is kind of stupid. I thought when I grew up, I was going to be blonde and blue-eyed, just like Elizabeth in the books. And then it didn't happen. And I was like, oh, damn. And so then I went to Stephen King and Clive Barker, and I started reading horror instead. And then I remember one of the first times I saw a book by Asian American was probably Amy Tan's Joy Luck Club. And then I saw in Canada, there was Evelyn Lau's A Diary of a Street Kid. And I remember telling my mom, for university, I want to do English lit. And she's like, you're going to starve to death. And why do you want to be a hooker? And I'm like, I don't want to be a hooker. Just because that book talks about a girl being a hooker and then writing about it doesn't mean I have to be a hooker too, So I put down my pen and I didn't write for a long time until after I got sort of a stable job and I could support myself away from my parents. But I think writing is a luxury, especially for people of BIPOC, because it takes up time, right? And the time you could be using to earn money to feed your family and stuff like that. And I feel very lucky that I'm able to write these days, that I have time to write, because looking at my parents, they worked so much. They never had time to do anything for themselves. So I think that was one of the biggest regrets my father had, was he gave his family all this time. And at the end, he was kind of pissed. He's like, damn it, I didn't do anything for myself. So I recommend you guys to set some time for yourself and be a little bit selfish, So.
It's a good recommendation, Jay. Be selfish, but be kind and humble to everybody else too. Cool. All right. Any other questions, comments? No. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. You have all been amazing and wonderful readings, and I can't wait to follow up and hear all the amazing things you're all doing.
Well, thank you for being a great host, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Round of thanks all around. All right. So have a wonderful evening, everybody.
You too.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.